Well, it's time for another fountain pen shootout. And I thought today, I don't know how much I will have to say about these pens, but I'm going to do my best. There was some interest expressed in doing this. So my main man Murray lent me this pen. This is a Armando Simoni Club Gladiatore Medio. There was also a larger Gladiatore. Now, this is Arco Celluloid, Arco Bronze. And then here we have an OMAS Milord. The story of the Milord Paragons is complicated. And now someone's going to say, Milord Paragon, those are two different pens. Yes, that's right. So I'm trying to build up to a story here. OMAS initially released the Paragon model, and it was about this size. Okay, I'm going to show you a Pilot Metropolitan right next to it so you can actually see the size. It's about that size. It's a little girthier, but it's about the length of a Metropolitan. Now, that was the original Paragon. Then at some point, and I don't have that pen here so I can't show you, just a sip of tea. Then OMAS released the Grand Paragon. They didn't call it the Grand Paragon, they just started to call that the Paragon. And then they made, which looks exactly like this, except it's bigger. It's also faceted, same proportions, same shape. I have reviewed that, so you can look that up. I think I've even done a shootout at some point between a Milord and a Paragon. Now you say, my lord, wait a minute, what's that? Well, I appreciate you calling me Lord, but having said that, the Milord, right, that OMAS then released was the same size pretty much as the original Paragon. So if you've lost track of everything I'm saying right now, that's because I couldn't explain it clearly. So let's do this very linearly. You had the Paragon, the size, then OMAS releases a larger Paragon, which they then called the Paragon, which is typically called by collectors the Grand Paragon. And then in addition to that larger Paragon, they kind of kept making original size Paragons, but now they called them Milord. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, this is a Milord, I think, but it could be an original Paragon, but I seem to recall that the original Paragons did not have this ring here, but now I'm wondering if I'm mixing everything up. So someone's going to correct me. I'm going to say this is a Milord, but realistically it's the same size as an old style Paragon. Then Armando Simoni Club joins the scene, buys all the material from OMAS as the OMAS company went under and started to make pens. And ASC said, you know what we should do? We should re-release the Paragon and we're going to call it the Gladiatore. And they did. And then they made another Gladiatore, which was smaller. So the Gladiatore is about the same size as a Grand Paragon. But then this is the Gladiatore Medio, and the Medio is the same size as an old style Paragon, aka a Milord. I deeply regret doing this video because this is one of the most confusing things I've ever tried to explain in one of these pen videos. Now the real question is, so which one to pick? Well, the Milords, the original Paragons, they come in different materials. The Gladiatore is only available, as far as I can remember, in the bronze celluloid, the Arco bronze celluloid. These are both Arco, so they're fun to compare. You can still find whether that is original Paragon or Milord or the Grand Paragon, they're just pretty expensive because they're now aftermarket, right? It's now second-hand. Sorry, you can't say that. They're now pre-owned. That makes them a little hard to find, but you can still find them on eBay and those kinds of places. And then you have the Gladiatore, which was a little easier to obtain because they were sold directly, but now they're sold out pretty much everywhere. So those two you're going to have to find a little bit. Now what I was really interested in this particular video is trying to compare them side by side, doing a writing sample, showing you some differences and maybe differences in likes or dislikes. So I'm just going to try to put this down here. What are the real differences? Well, it starts, of course, with the branding. So the Gladiatore has a finial which you might not be able to read, but it actually says ASC Armando Simoni Club, whereas this Milord has an O for OMAS. I always thought that was the point of that ring, that it's O for OMAS, but maybe I'm wrong. And these have a flat clip. That's the Gladiatore, but the OMAS has that nice bend, no, not bend, that's not the right word, curved clip. Both have a little wheel. So if you like a wheel, you're good. Okay, both of them have a wheel. The center bands are different. OMAS has this kind of subtle Greek key. In this case, silver, but they also made them with gold trim. The ASC is a little less subtle. It's a wider band, and the Greek key is a bit more pronounced, but that's it. One thing that I think is a very good addition is that ASC added another metal ring at this lower end of the cap. That precludes that celluloid from cracking, whereas with the OMAS pens, I'm sorry, I'm off camera, I'm sorry, that's fairly thin. You can see it's almost transparent, right? This lip there, and those do crack. So you have to be a little careful with that. So that's it cap-wise. As to the pens, you see that for the ASC, I'm going to use my little probe here. This is it's a letter opener. It's actually by Laban. They sent me this. Very kind. Anyway, the ASC has another metal ring there, whereas the OMAS, oh, this is really fun, the OMAS does not. You see that the ASC has slightly more threads than the OMAS, but the section shape is a little different. I find that with the ASC, this white thing is bent. That's why the lightest touch makes these pens flop around. The ASC has a section that flares out a little bit more than the OMAS does. Then the OMAS has a metal ring there. The problem with metal rings there is that they get exposed to ink all the time and they end up corroding and often falling off, I have found, with really extended use. I'm not just talking about OMAS, I'm talking about pens that have metal rings there. There's nothing to worry about if you have a pen with a metal ring down there and it's piston filled or cartridge converter filled. You use it with bottled ink. Just make sure you wipe that down very well. Don't let it stay wet. Okay, the OMAS nibs, known to be really nice nibs, right? The OMAS pistons were known to be dreadful and fragile, but the OMAS nibs were very, very nice. This is a silver trim nib. The ASC is gold, obviously, but OMAS had this very special nib shape and a nice design. I particularly like their old nibs, which had this sort of arrowhead that was really cool. ASC has chosen their Art Deco thing. Now, as to the feeds, what's interesting is that the feeds are very, very similar. They're both ebonite, and they're very similar. Ebonite, nice, has very good flow characteristics. So we have that. And then we have pistons. Now, I cannot guarantee this is not a captive converter in the ASC. I just don't know. I don't want to open this up because it's not my pen. It's hard to do anyway. But theoretically, a piston. You turn this knob and it sucks up ink. The OMAS does have a piston mechanism. Now, I thought what we should do next, and I'm just making sure they're not dried out, no they're not, is write with them side by side so you can see the difference there. I'm going to start with the ASC. I'm not going to write down medio, if you don't mind, gladiatore. This nib is not labeled, but it's M and 18K. The ink is Waterman Blue. It's a pleasant writer. A little bit of feedback, but overall, I find this a very pleasant writer. Nice, wet, and this nib I found has a little bit of springiness to it. Not advertised as a flex nib, and it's not labeled as their magic flex nib, I'm pretty sure, so be careful. Then, finally, we have the OMAS. And I'm going to call this Milord, but if someone says, no, that's definitely a Paragon, then let me know, and then I'm wrong, and I'm sorry. Okay, so here we have, I'm this dreadful handwriting. I'm right on these rings, I'm sorry. Nice. And I find this just a little bit smoother than, lazy dog, I'm going to leave it at that, a little bit smoother than the ASC. Again, the OMAS nibs, they were something else. Very pleasant, very smooth. And here too, very wet writer. Very careful, but there's definitely some springiness to this. Now, what about pricing? Well, that's a really interesting point. The Gladiatore Medio sold for $11.95 MSRP, but I think street price was about $9.50. You have to look around online to find one these days, but theoretically, that's about the price I think you could expect, about $9.50 US. The OMAS Milords, Paragons, whatever, again, I'm not talking about the Grand Paragon, but the regular size Paragon or Milords, they can go for anything these days, and it depends on whoever's selling it, what they want to ask. Given that this is a arco-celluloid, it's probably going to go for quite a lot. I've seen these come by for $1,200, $1,300, $1,500, $2,000. I'm not necessarily saying that's a fair price. That's certainly not what they initially sold for. But everybody wants arco-celluloid, and everybody wants the last of the OMAS pens. So bear in mind, you're going to spend a lot of money either way. The one thing I will say is OMAS pistons are notoriously fragile. So from that perspective, maybe the ASC is a bit better, but then we get into the area of, yeah, but it's not the original. People will then say, yeah, but the OMAS was the original. Yes, that's right. That's a decision you have to make. Both of them are very pleasant pens. As you can see, basically interchangeable in size and shape and all that stuff. So I think it really comes down to what you would prefer. There are certainly powerful arguments to be made for both pens. Both are gorgeous. Both are very pleasant writers. Both are really nice, good ink capacity. So that's really fun. Okay, I hope this was useful. Thank you to Murray for lending me both pens, not just this one, which I hadn't reviewed before, so I could do a review, but also this, so I could compare the two. I really appreciate it. I hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later. Let me know which one you would pick. Bye!